Excellent connection. And I need to share. Okay. Now we are live. It is 27 April 27, 2024. Let me share this one with the one live. Okay, great. We started. Let me share it on social media. Uh, Let me see. And let me get it one more time. Link, copy link. Where is the copy link? Okay. Um, where are you now? Let me share on few places. We just random we start, correct? Haphazardly,
Yeah.
spontaneously. Ours is spontaneous combustion. That's good. Okay, let me start. Yes, people, this is Edip Yuksel. I'm right now from Cincinnati. Greetings from Cincinnati. The gentleman next to me, who is in black, you have a black hat too.
Yeah.
He's John Morrow, and I have his most recent books here under advisement. I reviewed them and read them. In fact, one of them I have forward, correct, like introductory forward. The other one I have some extensive stuff there too. One of them is let me put myself in um, to be able to show speaker from. Yes, this is very provocative cover. Do you see it,
Yeah.
Maro?
Yes,
Yes.
yes. Mhm.
Yeah. Hijab, word of God or word of man, and basically, yep. This is a beautiful book. It has in the back. It had also some pictures, some interesting pictures. Okay. Well, you don't get this book for the pictures. This is a beautiful book. I think the best book written so far on hijab, the concept of hijab, covering women, basically burying women alive in black sacks. And this one, Islam and slavery. Um, some people may find this not acceptable, inappropriate cover. And that one too, this one even more provocative, that one more. But reality is much, much, much uglier than this one. And unfortunately, throughout history, sex slavery, which Sunnis, Shiites later call it Jariya, they sanctify it. They made it something as if it is good. They will get sawab. They will go to heaven. Okay, gentlemen, we should go on which book now? On slavery. Let's focus on that. Next time on the other book.
Sure, you mentioned the cover,
Yeah.
and it's certainly provocative. And I would just like to share the reaction that I've received from many Muslims. They look at the cover and they say, "You're going to lose sales." Okay, says no Muslim is going to buy this. What's the problem? They say it's offensive. What's offensive about it? They say, well, there's a naked woman on it. Okay, so that's offensive to you. Now, when I look at this, and I mean, some people might say that this is Islamophobic, Orientalist art. All right. But the fact of the matter is, as you mentioned, it reflects reality, right?
In fact, doesn't reflect properly. Reality is much uglier and worse
Oh,
than
no,
this.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
This is
This is, in fact,
and but
yeah.
this is part of the reality. Um, And so someone would look at this and say, well, this offends me. There's a naked woman. Okay.
That's good.
Uh, well, the naked woman here, with all due respect, does not offend me. What offends me is the fact that these men are selling her. They are trafficking her. My heart goes out to this woman. Okay. My instinct is to try to help and save this woman. But time and again, when Muslims look at this cover, they're offended by the nudity. Okay. So,
Beautiful, beautiful, well put, well
yes.
put.
So what infuriates me, say I have nothing but love for this woman, and I have nothing but the opposite of love for the people surrounding this woman. She is being trafficked, she is being sold, and yes, it is true that they used to exhibit women and men as if they were animals, as if they were cattle. They would inspect their teeth, they would inspect their private parts to see whether they had any sexually transmitted diseases,
Exactly.
if they would be good breeders. This is degrading. This is humiliating. Okay. And this is just transactional. This is just a day in the market. Okay. So they're offended by this nude woman who's being trafficked, but they're not offended by the women who are sitting at the back, who are covered from head to toe, who've got a litham or a niqab or a burqa. That doesn't offend them at all. And the fact that absolutely no one cares, all right, that this is a normal everyday occurrence. It's perfectly acceptable. It's not revolting to anyone. So that is my take on that image. And the book also contains many other paintings by artists. I mean, they didn't have cameras in the day, and so they used to travel the Muslim world and they would paint scenes. This is not just from the perverted imagination of Europeans, all right? And so they would paint the scenes. Um, but we also have photographs of slavery in the Muslim world because, it's just a continuation of what we are seeing here. So I just wanted to mention that there are other, even more graphic paintings in the book depicting so-called Islamic slavery.
Okay. Um, well, meanwhile, I'm trying to read the chats and respond them. That's not a good idea. I should deal with you. Okay. I think this is a beautiful introduction regarding the concept and the idea of slavery by itself if, is abhorrent. And the word even slavery, if they don't care about slavery.
Yeah.
Well, if this picture really offends them, then whole slavery should offend them 1,000 times more, correct?
Oh,
Then how in the
absolutely.
world, yeah,
Absolutely.
how in the world they can talk about slavery, sanitize it in hadith books, in their books of jurisprudence. Okay, can you please, before starting the subject, tell me a little bit about yourself and to introduce yourself to my audience? First of all, are you a Muslim? Perhaps people think that you are a kafir.
Yes, I am a Muslim, and I have been since the age of 16. I started my spiritual quest when I was about 13, and I took my Shahada when I was 16. So I consider myself a Muslim. I consider myself a mu'min, a believer, but first and foremost, I am a human being, and that's the most important thing. And I am also a rationalist. God gave me a brain, and I do use it. So I studied Islam in the Western world in an academic context. Uh, I studied Islam at the undergraduate level, the graduate level, and also at the doctoral level. Um, I focused on indigenous studies. I focused on Hispanic studies, and I also focused on Islamic studies. That was part and parcel of my studies at every level at the University of Toronto. And concurrently, I was studying with ulama and fuqaha and mujtahideen, Sunni scholars, Sufi scholars, and Shi'i scholars, Orientalists as well. So I have I was trained in academia, and I was also trained in the Hausa or the Islamic seminary.
Where was it, that Islamic seminary, so-called?
Well, the seminary is wherever there are scholars, basically. And I sat at the feet of scholars and consulted with scholars, and they guided me and directed me in my studies for over 40 years.
How
Um,
long you remained Sunni? When did you reformed yourself? You accepted Quran alone.
well, um, and when I was introduced to Islam, well, we have to rewind a little bit. Um, this is the 1980s. This is Canada. This is before we were receiving over a million immigrants per year. Um, and so Muslims were few and far between. And so basically, I studied the Quran and I was deeply impressed with the work in question. I thought it was a literary masterpiece. I thought it was sublime spiritually. I was very moved. And I read this book, I studied this book, I contemplated, and I said, well, this is who I am. Because I had long rejected the belief that Jesus was God or the Son of God. I didn't believe in the Trinity. I didn't believe in any of that nonsense, with all due respect. I was a monotheist. And if you're a monotheist, your options are quite limited. You can turn to Judaism, which really isn't monotheism, it was monolatry. They worshiped one God while acknowledging the existence of other gods. If you study the Bible, there's actually a progression from polytheism towards monotheism, and the Jews were always reverting to paganism and polytheism and so on. So Judaism was not for me. I'm not a Jewish person. I'm not of Jewish ancestry. There's a racial, ethnic component to it. And frankly, I believed in Jesus. I didn't believe he was God. So if Judaism rejects Jesus, then I would reject Judaism. Christianity wasn't for me. I could identify with the Arians and these heterodox sects and so on who viewed Jesus as a prophet and messenger of God, but none of them are around anymore. Um, I mean, there's Zoroastrianism. I'm not a dualist. Hinduism, that's not for me. Although in the Vedas it say God has many names, but the wise call him one. So maybe the Brahmins. Buddhism, true Buddhism. I know many Buddhists worship, all kinds of divinities and gods and idols and so on now, but true Buddhism does not believe in God. So that religion isn't for me. So what am I left with? I am left with Islam, a religion that believes in one God. And I believe that the Quranic depiction of Jesus as a human being was, I know it's setting the bar quite low, as Bart Ehrman would say, but, the Quran, Islam presents Jesus as a human being, a messianic prophet, and I'm willing to accept that. I'm not willing to go beyond that. So it was time to take my Shahada. And so I had to seek out Muslims. And as I said, they were few and far between, very difficult to find. And finally, I found some. And I regret, that encounter to this day. Because who were these? Initially, I thought these people were Muslims. Okay. Um, but I soon everything was off with these people. Is the right. So I had to open my mind. I had to think. I had to reason in order to come into Islam. And then these people are telling me, you can't ask questions, right? Right? You'd ask a question that's astaghfirullah, a'udhu billah, right? They would tell me that, aql, reasoning is haram. Reasoning is haram. They were fundamentalists. They were extremists. They were literalists. You know what? And they were obsessed with the law, just absolutely obsessed. It was pathological with
The law of punishment, all into
with,
punishment.
yes, just rituals, and punishments and punishments and punishments.
Robots.
And I read the Quran, and to me, it was just akhlaq. It was very spiritual, it was ethical, it was moral. They were just obsessed with like minute little technical details. And if you did something wrong, that I mean, it's just, and it was all about fire and brimstone and hell. Okay, and all these excruciating punishments. I still suffer, psychologically and spiritually from the time I spent with these demented people. Okay, and anyone would. And again, it was just, you know, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful, the most compassionate, the most merciful, the
Where is
loving.
mercy? Where is compassion in your religion?
And these people, it was God the Avenger, God the Wrathful. No mercy, no compassion, no love. These people were straight, they all deserve,
Sorry, so sad.
yeah, they deserve to be in a mental asylum. Okay, this is how bad these people were. And, Abdullah Azam, the founder of the international jihad movement and everything. This was the guy who was traveling the Western world and giving khutbas and stuff at mosques like the ones I was attending. Mujahideen leaders and so on were coming to give khutbas, and it was just atrocious. It was like Abu Bakr Baghdadi, or even Osama bin Laden seemed a bit moderate compared to these lunatics.
Compared to them, yeah.
Right?
You got the worst Salafis.
Complete,
Yeah.
and they were, despite this thing about the brotherhood of man and so on. You didn't have to scratch very deep to find out that these people were among the most virulently racist people you could ever come across. And not only that, all this nonsense about, oh, Islam liberated women. Islam gave women all these rights and so on. Give me a break. According to which standard? 7th century standards, not according to any standard after that.
Yeah.
But really, viciously, virulently misogynistic and sexist. And so these people, and it didn't take long. At the beginning is all achi, right? But if you disagree with these people, you're a mulhid, you're a zindiq, right? You're a kafir, you're a murtad. And next, just for asking questions, people were, accusing me of being an apostate and a heretic and so on. And, I said, surely this isn't Islam. So I went to a Shi'i, Ithna Ashari mosque. I went to the mosque, that's it. And then the rumors spread in the community that Ilyas Islam has become a Rafidi, right? He is a kafir, right? And a brother bumped into me, said, Ilyas, don't go back to the masjid. I said, why? He says, they're going to kill you. This is Canada. They're going to kill me. Yes. They say you're I said, I haven't become a Shia. I just wanted to meet these people and get to know them, because they were telling me all these crazy things about the Shia. Oh, the Shia, they have tails. What do you mean they have tails? Yes, the Shia, they have tails. I mean, really, did you grow up in a cave or something? Lunatic things. The Shia, they worship Ali, right? They think he's the prophet. They think God, but right, that's Gabriel was supposed to give the revelation to Ali, and then he by
Not
accident
confused.
to Muhammad, and so yeah, and they believe that the imams are gods and all these things, and so it's just like the craziest things. And I'm not just, if someone accuses someone, at least I need to go, if I'm a just person, and hear their side of the story, right?
Exactly.
And so I wanted to, yeah, and I hadn't become a Shi'i or anything, but then basically I had nowhere else to go, because the so-called Sunnis, and by the way, I'm sure you figured out by now, they were Salafi, Wahhabi, Takfiri, Jihadis.
Yeah.
Okay? These are the people. And these are the people that I found in virtually all of the mosques. Why? Because they were funded by a certain country.
Exactly.
And a country that indoctrinated people into this despicable ideology of Salafism, Wahhabism, Takfirism. So much so that Sunnism basically morphed into Salafism. And you meet people who say, oh, I'm a Sunni, I'm a Sunni. And then I ask them basic questions about Aqidah, basic questions of beliefs and so on. And no, these are not Sunni beliefs. These are Wahhabi beliefs. Okay? Please. Okay? No, you're not following Imam Malik, Shafi, Abu Hanifa, Imam Ahmad. No, you are following Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab and Ibn Taymiyyah. Okay? You are not following. I have no problem whatsoever. Actually, it took me very, very long. It took me decades until I found people who were actually Ahl al-Sunnah wa Tasawwuf, okay? Who were traditional Sunni Muslims who practiced Sufism or spirituality. So they weren't just Sufis, okay? They were Sunnis who followed Sunni jurisprudence and who followed Sufism. So it took a long time, right, to find actual real Sunnis. I have no problem with these people. I don't like extremists and fanatics and lunatics and fundamentalists. They could be Jews, they could be Christians, they could be
Absolutely. As long as they are peaceful people, peacemakers.
yeah, the Shia have no problem with the moderate traditional people and so on. It's just these lunatic terrorists. No, thank you. I'm not interested. So basically, that gives you an overview of my evolution. I studied with the Salafi Wahhabi Takfiri jihadis until they condemned me to death and they threatened to kill my family. Beautiful people, beautiful people. Yeah, lovely people.
Crazy.
Yes, no, no.
Unbelievable.
With all due respect, about the Zionists and the Christians and the Kuffar and so on. Never once have I been threatened by a Jewish person. No Zionist has ever threatened me. Maybe that means you're a Zionist. Well, maybe not. Maybe you are. So no Jews have ever threatened to kill me. No Christians have ever threatened to kill me. The only people who have threatened to kill me and kill my family are Muslims. Okay? Right? A certain type of Muslim. Right? I do not forgive, and wallahi, I do not forget. All right? So, yeah.
Wow.
It's like one brother told me, Ilyas, you become Shia. Your blood is halal. I said, bring it on. Let's go right here. Well, no, brother, no, I'm serious. Right? You just threaten me. You say my blood is halal. Try to kill me. I'll kill you right here, right now. Simple as that. Okay?
Oh, you are
I
incredible.
promise I make that anyone who threatens to kill me. Watch your back, Jack. Watch your back. You won't see it. Right?
Oh,
You won't
gosh.
see me coming. Okay? So, anyhow, lunatics. Lunatics, absolute, complete, total lunatics.
They
And so,
are. I am laughing because I'm from nervousness. They are unfortunately gone crazy. Young people could be beautiful, wonderful, productive peacemakers in the community, but they are turned to bigots and psychopaths. It's really creates schizophrenic personality, multiple personalities. In one way, you see, wow, it is wonderful person, loving. In another, he turned just the opposite.
oh,
It's
yes,
incredible.
yes, Edip, absolutely, absolutely. How many people have I seen come into Islam and before they became Muslims, they were Christians, or some of them were Jewish, or some of them were like secular, some of them were just humanist, okay? But, you know, most of them believe that women can go out. Now they become Muslims and women can't go out unless they're accompanied by a mahram. Okay, lovely. I remember once there was a white sister, a convert, and it was late at night and was in downtown Toronto. And she went to the Imam. She says, Imam, is there any way you can give me a lift home? And he said, I cannot be alone with you. It's haram. Okay, right? You're ghair mahram. I could not be alone with you. It's haram. Sorry. And so he left her stranded downtown Toronto at night. So really now, if someone has a brain, is there really, real maybe the imam couldn't control himself. I mean, really, to me, that's what he's admitting. But let's just assume that he is an imam and he's a good person and he's a practicing Muslim. So, what danger did he pose to this woman? Okay, he's the imam. He's got his long robe. He's got his beard. He's got his turban. Turban. She's wearing hijab. Okay, what danger is there? Okay, where is the problem in him giving a lift home for the sake of her safety? No, right? They followed the law of the letter, they couldn't do it. Okay, so women can't go out, and then women can't work. How many women, white women converts, and also African American, how many women I have seen destroyed who embraced Islam, the wrong kind of Islam? Okay, I have no problem with good Islam. But there was one sister. She married a Jordanian Palestinian brother. She was a single mom. She's divorced, had a few kids, very, very successful real estate agent, had a big, beautiful beach house, marries a Palestinian. And he tells her, you have to sell the house. She says, why? Well, you're paying interest. It's haram. Okay. And so we've got a little bit of an echo, though. I don't know if I should lower my volume
Uh,
or.
if YouTube is open, if you open this YouTube, turn the microphone, the speaker off on YouTube. Is your YouTube open?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I've
Let
lowered.
me let me turn mine off, my microphone. First of all,
Yeah,
usually I talk much more than my guests. Right now, you are breaking the record of talking more than me, which is good for you
yeah.
for interview. That's beautiful. But we may come back later to this one because your life story is very interesting. I may just change the topic
Oh no,
to
no. We should get to the book. We should get to the book. It's
yeah, we will get. And I love it. No, no, very important your
no, but
experience.
it's going to lead into the book. Okay, so
Okay.
I'll just be very quick about this.
Oh, you don't need to be quick. Take your time. I love your story.
So
Okay,
basically,
you were talking about your friend, is the woman became Muslim. What was it?
yeah,
Sunni.
she becomes a Muslim. He says you have to sell the house because interest is haram. She sells her house and now she's renting.
Well, even if interest is haram, taking interest should be haram, not being forced to giving. That person is the victim, but they are
Right.
blaming victim instead of blaming. Yeah, they blame the other party, but also equally they blame poor victim. Come
But
on.
even if you're renting, you're paying interest. Obviously, that's going to pay interest on the landlord. On he owns it, and you're paying your rent, and he's paying the interest on it. There's no way around it. But any event,
Yeah. Okay.
so the house, sell it, move into rent a place, rent a house. Okay. Now again, spending and spending and spending and money, and it's going nowhere. Okay, you're just burning money, flushing it down the toilet. And then he says, well, you can't work, right? Because you're a woman and it's haram. And she says, I can't work. No. She says, what do I do? He says, go on welfare, right? Right. And so now she goes from being a successful, professional who's a homeowner, beautiful property on the lake. And now she's living in a rented house and she can't work anymore because, of course, it's haram. And she's living on welfare. And then his family never accepted the fact that he married a white woman after all. And they pressured her and and pressured him to divorce her. And then he completely and totally destroyed her in every sense, destroyed her financially, destroyed her self-esteem. And next thing you know, he dumps her. But just these stories repeat themselves. Okay. Let me give you another example. Okay. So the
Please.
average human being does not believe in slavery. Okay. So most of us have evolved, right? To a point where we recognize that, what, this is not moral, this is not ethical, this is not how we should treat people. But you would be hard pressed to find an imam, one of these convert imams, who rejects slavery, who will tell you straight out that slavery is haram. They might tell you, well, it's haram now, but it was halal then. Really? Okay, just like that. So yeah, many of them, far too many of them, they believe that Slavery is halal. It is permitted. And some go so far as to say if you're against slavery and sexual slavery, then this places you outside of the fold of Islam. So and some of these they're black brothers, right? They're African Americans, African Canadians. They're from the Caribbean. I know these people personally, and they believe in slavery. Well, I'm sorry, you were better off as a Christian or a Rastafarian or just a secular humanist, or a lot of them were leftist or communist or Marxist and so on. Really? Um, yeah. So you have black people, and then you have some white people out there, some white Muslim converts who argue that, slavery is, commanded by God, commanded in the Quran and the Hadith and Islamic law. And yeah. And if you disagree, then you're kafir. Your blood is halal. That's the next step. Some of them don't say it, but it's implied.
Yep. Okay. Now the question is, of course, the Quran, there is no room for slavery. How do you say? It mentions slavery. It talks about slaves. It talks about alcohol. It talks about murder. It talks about theft, thieves. It talks about Pharaoh. It doesn't mean when the Quran talks about it, it doesn't mean condone it, approve it. It really the Quran, according to the Quran, slavery, it is the biggest crime against God and humanity because according to the Quran, slavery is shirk. If you own a slave, you claim to be the Rab, the Lord of the slave. You become like Pharaoh. Pharaoh claimed that he was the Ana Rabbukum al-Ala, I am your high Lord, I am your Lord, and therefore he made people his abd, his slave. Well, according to the Quran, we can only be the servant, slave of God, our Creator, who is perfect. Therefore, being slave of the truth, being slave of justice, being slave of knowledge, being slave of peace, is that's the only time is okay because it will make you free. It will make you a better human being. But being slave of another human being is evil. It will degrade you. And God gave humanity honor, says, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We made human being honorable. And if you are accepting slavery to be a slave of another human being, you basically worship that human being. You betrayed your God given honor. If someone enslaves another person, that person claims to be God or your God, which is impostor, a big liar, and also unjust. According to the Quran, slavery is shirk. Therefore, it is not like any other crimes for those who look in the Quran, absolutely not. There are a few verses of the Quran, unfortunately, distorted. Please, I don't want to go over details. I think you have done great job here. And in Quran also, reformist translation, look at those verses, compare with the Sunni translations. You will see major distortions on some of the verses. And tell me about your research, just summarize a little bit and on this subject, please. When
Oh,
it was invented, when it was, of course, you may talk about hadith books centuries after Muhammad. Go ahead, please.
well, I'd just like to give you a little bit of background information on how I came to write this book. Okay, so um, several years ago, this book was published, Slavery in Islam, okay, by Dr. Jonathan A.C. Brown. Um,
Oh, hold on. We forgot that you had something about disclaimer. I want to show this one. Hold on. Okay. Are you there?
yes, I'm here.
Okay, I'm not there. That means okay. Let me put the disclaimers. Can you read it?
Yeah, that no John Brown was harmed in the writing of this book, I think, something like that. Yeah.
Yes. No John Brown was harmed in the writing of this book. Tell me about the story of this one and then continue.
Oh, well, John Brown was a famous abolitionist in the United States. So that name is associated with a white person who fought against slavery. And it
I had
also,
no idea about this. What a coincidence. What incredible. Look at this.
ironic. Yeah.
Ironic, yes.
So we have the one John Brown who's willing to use lethal force and go, farm to farm and plantation to plantation, freeing enslaved African Americans. And then you have another one who's basically, an apologist for slavery. And there's also a Bob Marley song that talks about Sheriff John Brown trying to shoot me down, right? Every time I plant a seed, he says, kill it before it grows. So, I mean, there's an allusion to John Brown, who yeah, Malcolm X spoke about, and also there's an allusion to that Bob Marley song. But basically, um, of course,
This one, correct?
uh,
Exposing the lies of Professor Jonathan Brown on slavery.
yes, I've watched that video.
Okay, this video on Jonathan Brown.
Yes,
Okay, I want to show you
I've
the cover
watched
of the
many
one
of your
that
videos,
too.
and I would recommend them to viewers. Now, so he published
Yeah.
that book, and I mean, I know Dr. Brown, and he's a fine scholar. I have no issues with him as a person. This is simply an ideological disagreement. That's all that it is. So I was very fond of his book, Misquoting Muhammad. And when I saw that he had published a book on slavery in Islam, I was very eager to read it. And a journal, Reading Religion, asked me to review it. And I said, fantastic, let me review this book. Okay. And here is the review. It's not very long. I'd just like to read it to you because it gives some important background information.
Okay.
In Slavery in Islam, Dr. Jonathan A.C. Brown, the Al-Walid bin Talal Chair of Islamic Civilization at Georgetown University, devotes over 400 pages to support his conviction that slavery and concubinage are permissible according to the Quran and the teachings and practice of the Prophet Muhammad. He is adamant that God and his messenger allowed, condoned, and supported them. In his words, the permissibility of slavery and concubinage is undeniable in the Quran.
Mhm.
Rather than abolish sexual slavery, Brown asserts that Muslim jurists embraced the practice fully and took it to its maximum. He admits that the number of concubines taken by Muslims jumped dramatically with the early Islamic conquests. Brown also stresses that in Islamic law, consent for sexual relations was assumed or irrelevant. Not only does he go as far as to trivialize the age of consent, moreover, he argues that freedom is not a fundamental human right in Islamic law and treats serial polygamists who had hundreds of sex slaves as moral exemplars. Brown equates opposition to the institution of slavery and sexual servitude as opposition to the messenger of God. He considers those who oppose slavery but refuse to condemn the prophet to be hypocrites. When faced with dissenting views on the disputed subject of the legitimacy of slavery in Islam, Brown's strategy is to respond with a loaded trick, question, and a theological trap. Did the Prophet Muhammad commit a grave moral wrong? For Brown, a Muslim,
Assuming that it was true. Yeah.
assuming that it was true. For
Yeah.
Brown, a Muslim does not remain a Muslim if he or she answers in the affirmative. Consequently, he provides a jurisprudential justification for the practice of takfir, namely the excommunication of so-called heretics and apostates, and provides ample evidence that Muslims have a long history of enslaving other Muslims who do not share their ideology. Brown may claim to believe that slavery is wrong. However, he makes an important disclaimer. As a Muslim myself, I cannot condemn it as grossly intrinsically immoral across space and time. To do so would be to condemn the Quran, the Prophet Muhammad, and God's law as morally compromised. However, rather than support Islamic abolitionists, he assumes the role of the devil's advocate, devoting an inordinate amount of time in his book to dismissing, debunking, and repudiating their arguments as violating the Quran, the Sunnah, and the Sharia. If one rejects the views of Muslim scholars who spurn slavery, is one an opponent or supporter of this evil and abominable institution? In fact, Brown wonders whether slavery is in the DNA of Islam. In his words, we cannot pretend it is not a part of our religion. Brown's entire work is an ideological defense of slave master Islam. That it comes from a white American Muslim is even more abhorrent. This is the product of a conscious choice. His work is not simply a survey of historical opinions on the permissibility of enslavement, human bondage, sexual captivity, subjugation, and violation. It is a validation of those views. Alternative interpretations of Islam, which are abolitionist and emancipatory, are amply available. He is perfectly familiar with their arguments and evidence, namely that sexual relations are only permissible in wedlock and that the Prophet Muhammad stated that slave traders were the worst human beings. Brown, however, has deliberately decided to denounce them. And I'm going to wrap up here, final paragraph. The fact remains that there is not a single verse in the Quran that commands slavery. The verses that touch upon the topic are descriptive. They deal with a temporal socioeconomic reality. Slavery is neither an article of faith, nor is it a religious obligation. In fact, the Quran encourages and even requires Muslims to emancipate enslaved people. As far as the exponents of Islam's spiritual, moral, ethical, and egalitarian tradition are concerned, the Quran, the Prophet, and Islam introduced a system that would reform the practice of slavery and abolish it entirely and forever. Rather than select the sharp and narrow path, Brown has selected the wide and shallow one of the classical Islamic status quo. And since he likes to confront critics with a question, this review ends with a question not of my own, but one that God poses in the Quran. What will make you know what the steep path is? It is the freeing of a slave. So
Beautiful.
that's the review that I wrote for the book for an academic journal. The editor rejected it, and
What?
she rejected it. She commissioned it, and then she rejected it. She says you're misrepresenting his views. I said, did you read the book? I gave all the quotations and the page numbers and everything. These are citations. These are his words. Did you read the book? She says, no. She says, I Googled him. And I say, wow, I'm just so impressed as your
What kind
academic
of editor?
And I found a quote where he says he believes that slavery is wrong. Well, I don't care if he believes that slavery is wrong. Maybe he does. That's not the point. The point is he says that
Prophet Muhammad had
that,
slaves.
that God and the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad, okay, that all of them endorsed and legitimized slavery. I disagree, and I form part of a long tradition of people who have disagreed about that since the 7th century. So it is not true that nobody questioned, called into question the slavery as an institution
There
until
is something even more than that.
that's not true.
It was questioned all the time, and majority of those questions they were rejected, excommunicated, their books destroyed.
Absolutely.
Therefore, we don't hear all the voices. By the way,
Absolutely.
these
It's
are the voices, the
one-sided.
powerful one, pro sultans and stuff. Therefore, but still, how they kind of silenced, they killed many. Still, we see that there were rejection of the slavery idea of slavery since the beginning. Beautiful.
Absolutely. And, of course, in the book, I give hundreds of edicts and rulings from scholars and so on from the 7th century to the 21st century. Okay, but again, we can just go back. I mean, we can just go back to the Quran. Uh,
Exactly.
and as you were mentioning, when the Quran addresses the issue of slavery, it is always the slavery of the human being towards God. You will never find the word abd used in the sense of a slave, okay? Like a person owned by another person. No. The abd is Abdullah. It is the servant of God. Where in the Quran do we find the word surriya or jariya or amma or mamluka? the Arabic language is very clear. It is very precise. There is nothing about sexual slavery. And these translations of the Quran, and we could have a program just on the distortions and the corruption and the perversion of that we see in these Quranic translations. It's outrageous how they misrepresent
Quran,
what it actually
yes.
says. I mean, it talks about ma malakat aymanakum, and we can get into that,
Imanukum or Imanukum.
right?
Yes.
Uh, that does not mean slave, right? Quite
Yeah.
often it's translated as slaves. But I mean, we can touch upon that. And you are one of the you're one of the you're one of the first authorities to address this, long before I did, in your writings and in your translation and commentary of the Quran. Now, this expression, I'd like to talk about it a little bit. Ma malakat aymanakum. First of all, this is
It
unattested.
could be read two ways. Ma
Yeah,
malakat imanukum or ma malakat imanakum.
yeah.
Either way, it could be read, and both are also intended. Okay, go ahead. One is subject, the other is object. Go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. And
Mutual, yeah, mutual covenant. Those whom you have mutual rights, mutual obligations. Go ahead.
her.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, Bernard Freeman, who is a professor of law, wrote this book, which I do recommend. This is one of the
Oh, I never knew there was such a book, Possessed by the Right Hand.
yes,
The right hand is a wrong translation of Aman. Aman throughout the Quran, it means words, contracts, treaties. They broke their Aman says. It doesn't mean they broke their arm, their hand. It is Aman. Keep your Aman, keep your words. The word Aman throughout the Quran, other verses, you check it, it means obligations, treaty, contract. And this is about in Western culture, we know common law marriage. You don't have kind of uh, official, according to rules, marriage. It is natural friendship, girlfriend, boyfriend, and you live together. Or there are other also certain exceptions, like during wartime, someone who is married and moved to the other side while legally is married, and that marriage becomes null during the thing because of the war. You can marry that one. Another is a slave is freed, and then you have contract with that one. No more slaves is becoming mutually. You have certain obligations toward each other. Mashallah.
yes, you've addressed all of this beautifully in your previous writing and on your website and your Quranic translation and commentary. This book by Bernard Freeman, I do recommend. It is one of the best books on slavery
I will
in
check.
Islam. It deals
Yeah.
with sexual slavery. Now, Bernard Freeman is an African American. He is a professor of law. He is also a Muslim, and he's been a Muslim for a long time. He speaks Arabic. He's an academic, but he is a qualified faqih or jurist in my mind, and a mufti or a mushtahid. And and of course, unlike Brown, Bernard Freeman is very clear that slavery and sexual slavery are prohibited in Islamic law, and that
Mashallah.
we have now reached an ijma or a consensus that it is prohibited. So this is beautiful, and I support that. So let us go back to this issue of ma malakat aymanakum. Now,
Okay.
first of all, like Bernard Freeman mentions that this is unattested, okay? We do not find this expression anywhere else. And where do we look for these expressions? Well, I mean, we don't have any Arabic literature that predates the Quran, so we look at Syriac literature. We don't find a similar expression. We may look at Greek literature, Greek language. We might look at Amharic. We might look at Persian, because all of these surrounding cultures and religions and languages all influenced Islam and the language of the Quran and so on. So this expression puzzled Muslim scholars and jurists and commentators and exegetes of the Quran, right?
Okay.
Um, so some scholars noted that it is not in the present tense. It is in the past tense. So they argue that this applies to enslaved people um, before Islam came. So, for example, all right, you have these people, Arabs. Some of them have enslaved women. Okay, they've been living with them for years or decades. They have sex with them. They have children with them. They're part of their extended family. They might have a wife. They have some slave girls and so on. And so some scholars said that, well, when it's talking about ma malakat amanakum, it applies to the slaves at that time, right? Those
Aha.
those
Let me let
possessed,
me make
yeah, yeah, hold
yes.
on a second, those possessed by your right hand, right? In the
Okay.
preterite, the past tense, and they
You say
argue, yeah. So that's
if it
one
is
explanation.
even we understand as a right hand, which is really according to Quranic terminology, it is your contract. But even if you understand right hand, they argue that since it is ma malakat aymanukum, it is not ma yamliku aymanukum. It is not in present continuous tense. It is in past tense. It refers to previous slaves when they were before Islam, they had slaves, and later through Islam, they had to free them. And but still, their relationship, there is certain past relationship. It's referring to their relationship, which
Yes.
is no more slavery. It is wife and husband.
So that's one explanation. Other scholars, the Mufassirin and so on, mention that, well, it's uh, it's plural, so therefore it's gender inclusive. And so, those whom your right hand possess would also include men. And so, how can you say that you can have sex with a woman that your right hand possesses? That would also imply that a woman who owns a male slave could have sex with him. And so, if what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and they said this cannot possibly mean concubines, right?
Yeah.
Because that would mean women have the right to have sex with their male slaves. That's another
Mhm.
explanation. Um, Other scholars have argued that this actually refers to wives, okay?
Mhm.
Those with whom you have a contract, like you said, okay, that you have an oath. So they could be wives. Maybe they're common law wives or they're a lower class wife. In Judaism, they had two levels of wives, okay? A
Mhm.
concubine
Mhm.
in Judaism is not just an enslaved woman. Uh,
Mhm.
you have one wife, and she's the head of like the household and so on. She's like, the matron or whatever, the big boss. She's the first one. And then any second or third wife, they're just concubines. They have different rights, but they're still wives. It's a legitimate relationship according to Jewish law. So other scholars argued that this expression refers to enslaved women who were taken as wives. Okay, so that the Quran was making a distinction between free women that you married and enslaved women. It never says you can go and buy an enslaved and trafficked woman and just have sex with her. You could buy her, emancipate her, and marry her. But she comes from a different background. She has a lower standing, right? Her rank is different in society. She's multi traumatic. She's experienced all kinds of horrible things. So, can you treat like this lower class woman who was kidnapped and trafficked and abused by men? Can you treat her the same way as a free woman from an upper class family? But this you say, oh, that's discriminatory. And so no, 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 it wasn't. It was like um, you know, the jurist said, well, the free woman, she has to cover more, and like this woman, she doesn't really have to cover as much. She has more
Well,
free.
the Quran,
Some of the jurists,
sorry,
they presented it like that. Go ahead.
yeah, the Quran accepts slave in the society. There are because mushriks, there are people of the book. They had slaves. It was reality out of Mu'min's circle, and therefore there is reference to them. And if a slave, for example, someone's slave. It cannot be a mu'min slave. A monotheist cannot have slave. This is categorically, I can argue with hundreds of verses of the Quran. There is no way a person who say I'm monotheist, he cannot claim to be Pharaoh at the same
Yeah.
time. He cannot become a lord of another human being.
Yeah.
But there were some, and if they commit some zina means with a married man. Zina in the Quran, it is married people if they betray each other. It's not about unmarried people, bachelors. If if she, let's say, with a believer husband or wife, if a slave does the zina, then according to the Quran, the punishment for that will be lenient, half of the punishment of the things, because
Right.
considering how much trauma they passed through in the past, or maybe if they are still a slave of another mushrik,
Sure.
another disbeliever. Yeah.
Now, in the
Um,
book, I mention another possibility. Okay. So where did this idea come from for this type of relationship or marriage? And I looked into Roman law. And in the Roman Empire and Byzantium and so on, they had two different types of marriage. They had one that was called cum manu, which means with hands. Okay, the hand represents authority, or sine manu, which means without hands or out of
interest.
hand. Now, in the cum manu marriage among the Romans, this is a traditional patriarchal marriage. So the woman, when she's married, falls under the authority of her husband. Okay. She does not have like freedom. She doesn't have like the same freedom of mobility and so on as she would have. Um, she does inherit from the husband. So her property becomes the property of the husband upon marriage. But upon his death, she does inherit. She does not have the right to divorce. All right. So this is really a traditional patriarchal form of marriage. There was another form of marriage called sine manu, which is out of hand. In that type of marriage, the woman is free and independent, and she maintains her property. It doesn't become the property of the husband. She is free to divorce at any time she wants. She's not locked into this marriage, but she does not inherit. So those of us who are familiar with zawaj al-muta, or this temporary marriage or this pleasure marriage, will notice the very clear parallels between temporary and permanent marriage in Shi'i fiqh and Roman law. So it is possible that uh, this expression "ma malakat aymanakum" may relate to these two different types of marriages. So some Shia scholars think that it refers to mutta. Okay, so one is zawaj and the other is mutta. Now, going through Roman law and so on, I came across something startling of a different legal category, and it is secundum manus sue potentiam. All right, which means um, under well, how should I translate this? Yeah, it means those women who are under the power or authority of your hands. And this referred to women, to wives who came from military conquests. All right. So secundum manus sue potentiam. Okay. So those who are under it uses the word hand in Latin. So those who are under the authority of your hand. Okay. Um, yeah. So again, both expressions use the whole hand thing. And so in Roman law, a free woman, you would marry a free woman, and she would have a certain set of rules and laws that apply to her. But there was also a category for married women who had been enslaved. So the Romans were going around conquering people, and then they would bring these slaves to the market, and it wasn't a question of just buying them and having sex with them. They would buy them and marry them. But since they were foreign women who had been enslaved, they had different rights. So this whole thing that this expression refers to slaves and enslaved people, there's a lot more to it than that. So that's all I want to say about that. Well, maybe one more thing. One more thing. There is
Okay.
a scholar from Belgium by the name of Guillaume D. Okay?
Mhm.
Guillaume D. And he published a paper called Ascetic and Non-Ascetic Layers in the Quran, a Case Study. And he examines this expression in Quran 23, 1 to 11, and in Quran 70, verse 22 to 35, right? Um, Basically, it says, successful are the believers who are humble in their prayers and who turn away from frivolous talk and who practice the zakat and who guard their private parts, except concerning their wives and what their right hands own. Okay. Guillaume D is very, very perceptive. And of course, he's basing himself on the traditional Sunni and Shia interpretation of this verse of the Quran, which, um, yeah, which interprets this as female slaves, what their right hands own. He has compared this to Syriac works, Syriac Christian works that were given to new converts, okay? And that, they're like guides for new people to the faith, basically. And he finds he finds this very, very unusual. Okay, and this is not something. I mean, it's not lost on perceptive readers who guard their private parts, except from their wives and their sex slaves. Okay, so this is exhorting people to believe in God, to give charity, and to be chaste. And then you have this verse here that says, except with your sex slaves. He believes, and he's argued quite persuasively, that that verse, that these instances of those whom your right hands possess are interpolations. Now, this may be going a little bit too far for most believing Muslims. Maybe some academics might give it some credence. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the case, but he feels that this was added by some caliph or something at some point in order to rally troops for jihad. Okay? And how did they
Well,
rally for
I
jihad?
would
Yeah,
if
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. They would
I
say,
didn't
well,
have
you're going to
yeah,
get booty,
yep.
literally and metaphorically. Uh,
Absolutely. If I didn't have correct understanding of it,
yeah,
and if I didn't witness mathematical structure of the Quran,
yes,
I would prefer this method, what he's doing. Absolutely, I will reject the slavery. I would say if this cannot be from God, it is added later. He assumes that this
yes.
is it, and therefore, of course, he's smart. God cannot be ordering slavery because contradict with many verses of the Quran, as I said.
Absolutely. What's the point? What's the
Yeah,
point
yeah.
to chastity? Okay. What's the point if you can
While
have
you
countless
can,
sex
uh,
slaves?
and many of them. Now, question for you. Let's a
Yeah.
little bit cool down. Which messenger of God, prophet's name is mentioned more frequently in the Quran? Do you know?
Well, I mean, you mentioned there's Moses,
Yeah, I have in fact the list. Let me show. This was in my book. Let me show you. Hold on. Quran and Büyük Mucize, this one in 1984, 85. And I was like this. Do you see me?
yes, yes, mashallah.
Black one is me. The
Yeah.
the one, yeah. Now Ahmedida, the one next to me. Now in this book, I did some study on the mathematical structure of the Quran. Half of it is translation of Ahmedida's book about Code 19 Quran. He summarized Rashad's work, and the
Yes.
other half is about. If you don't talk, I can show just the pages. Okay, here it is.
Mhm.
Don't say him when you say you come to the screen. These are some of the scientific verses that I studied that time, analyzed. Uh, I want to just browse it for you guys.
Beautiful.
Anyway, uh,
So why is the story of Moses so
okay,
important
here is the
in
Moses.
the
Oh,
slavery? Please share
you're
for
right.
the viewers.
And here I got the names of the messengers, their frequencies of the in the Quran. The first one is Ahmed is once really is not a proper name. I should not have included that one. That is description means the one who is praising God the most. And Uzair, Eliasa, Elias, Idris, Zulkif, Luqman, Muhammad four times, Ayub, Job, and then Yahya means John five times, Hud seven times, and then Abraham is 69 times. Imagine Noah 43 times, Abraham 69 times. The last one is Moses, you see, 100
Yeah.
36 times. Now, Moses is the most mentioned messenger prophet of God, and also the story of liberation from slavery, escaping to freedom, is the most frequent story in the Quran told piece by piece, and certain aspect of it is highlighted, is very different, interesting. And the story of struggle of children of Israel from slavery to freedom is the most emphasized story in the Quran.
Yeah.
And how in the world you say this Quran, who sides not with Pharaoh, not with slave owner, with these people who fought against slavery, like Moses and these people with him, how this book can promote, can even give permission to something that the most abhorrent, the example of evil has done. And one of the most revered prophet fought against it. It's impossible. Yeah,
Yes, and few Muslims and even non-Muslims have an idea of the magnitude of slavery in the Muslim world from the 7th century all the way down to the 20th century. A minimum of 28 million Africans were enslaved in the Muslim Middle East.
they're not Muslim. They use the name word. They call them
Yes,
Sunni or
yes, yes.
Shiite
As
people.
so-called Muslims.
Unfortunately, they are
Uh,
not. They cannot be considered really Muslim
No, no,
peacemakers.
no, absolutely. And so I'm very clear about that, in the book when I talk about Islamic
In quote
slavery. Okay.
with
I don't
capital.
I refuse to disparage Islam and God and the Prophet and the Quran. No, 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 no.
Mashallah,
No, it's غير Islam, غير Islam. Um,
mashallah.
it's calculated that 80% um, of those captured by the slave traders died before reaching the slave markets.
Wow.
So it's believed that the death toll from 1400 years of Arab and so-called Muslim slave raids into Africa could have been as high as 112 million. So again, I repeat, 28 million to 30 million Black Africans were enslaved. Okay. Uh, Over 100 million may have died. Okay. So we need to compare that to the transatlantic slave trade. And this has been studied as well in depth. 10 to 12 million Blacks were enslaved. They made it across the Atlantic. Most historians believe that about 2 million died during the passage. Some people argue that it could be far higher than that. But again, 10 to 12 million Blacks enslaved in the transatlantic slave trade, compared to 28 million Black Africans enslaved by so-called Muslims. All right? Now, I'm just talking about Black people. I'm not talking about Berbers who were enslaved during this early period of imperialism. I'm not talking about the Europeans. I'm not talking about Hindus and other populations. I'm talking just about African human beings who were enslaved. If anyone is interested in learning more about this topic, then I would recommend this book right here. Okay.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, John. Alem Billah Azuma.
Good.
Okay,
It's
thank
called
you.
The Legacy of Arab Islam in Africa, A Quest for Interreligious Dialogue by John Andrew Azuma, who is, I believe he's from Ghana. Um, so he's a Black African, and he's done excellent work here. Another book I'd
Yeah,
like to mention
yeah.
is by Mohamed Diako. This one is in French, L'esclavage en Islam.
I
Now,
will put the name of these books down and the links to them on the in the information section, God willing.
Shukran
And
Jazilan.
if
Now,
you put,
this is a treatise by a Black Francophone uh, African Muslim jurist.
can you show again?
He is a qualified faqih, and he argues that slavery is haram, right?
MashaAllah.
So neither
Now,
implicitly nor explicitly does the Quran recognize the right to reduce war prisoners to slavery. The Prophet never did such a thing.
question. Uh,
Yes.
in Christianity, in the Bible, in Old Testament, there are some distortions in meaning of the verses. I haven't studied Old Testament thoroughly, but I discovered there are major distortions, like the word rajim means excommunication in Arabic and also in Hebrew. It doesn't mean stoning to death. In the Quran, Shaitani Rajim, the excommunicated Satan. God did not stone Satan to death. It is later interpretation of the excommunication. Excommunication must be done by throwing, stoning, and must have killed. And excommunication in Old Testament, doing certain kind of crimes or kind of against norms, that person excommunicated temporarily or for life. Excommunicating for life is major crime, or if it is something small, temporary excommunication. This is rajim. However, rabbi later they changed the meaning of rajim to stoning to death, and you see many incredible, unacceptable, horrible situation in Old Testament. If a woman does this, let's say during menstruation does this, stone her to death, stone her to death, stone this to death. Very kind of trivial things is being kind of punished by stoning to death, all because the excommunication, temporary, 1 day, 2 day, kind of like shunning that person, or maybe if it is you want to kind of kick off all from the community, that's fine. If done too bad stuff, but this is turned to stoning to death. Similarly, Slavery, I don't know in Old Testament what has done, like "Ma meleket eymanukum," how they distort the meaning of the word, how there is no jariyah, they include jariyah in the Quran, which doesn't exist,
Right.
these kind of things. And the same in the New Testament, I don't see even Jesus nowhere, even in their misinterpretation, translations, nowhere condone, approve slavery. However, Saint Paul is the one is condones slavery by telling slaves you should obey your owners, your slave owners and stuff. And I think that is one of the five major distortions done by Saint Paul in Christianity, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And if we look at the early Christians, they were actively involved in emancipating enslaved human beings. So if they were following the example of Jesus, then
They were
perhaps,
Muslims, they were peacemakers. Yep,
yeah, absolutely.
Jesus. Yeah.
Now, Mohammed Diaco, I mean, I can't do justice to all of his arguments. Of course, his book is in French. I hope and pray that someone will translate it and publish it in English, and why not in Arabic? Um, he mentions that protecting slaves does not mean protecting slavery. So, yes, the Prophet uh, introduced so the argument that the jurists make is that, yeah, Islam wanted to moderate the harms of slavery, and they introduced these laws to make it less, horrible. But Diaco makes the
No
point that
way. You
because
cannot sanitize evil.
no, no, you
The
can't. Absolutely
devil.
not. Uh,
Hey,
he wrote
let's
that.
take it a little bit short,
Yeah,
and we want to come to the end, but we'll
sure.
continue many, many discussions. I would like to have
Oh,
kind of periodical with you.
oh,
Uh,
inshallah, there is much to
you
be
know,
said.
I'm happy at least, thank God, someone talks more than I do. Because I got a reputation, John, that
Yeah.
when I invite people, I start talking more than they do, and they always criticize me. Edip, you didn't give chance to the guest talk. I am happy to see sometimes a guest like you, lovely.
Well, I'm not
So,
much of a talker. I'm a writer, and
yeah, I know.
it's difficult for me to talk. And
No, you
I,
are talking very well. Here
yes,
is
I
a
know.
question for you.
It's just because I'm very passionate, and yeah. So if you get me talking on a topic like this, yes, yeah.
Yeah, I want to ask you, how do you like my shirt?
Well, it's lovely.
It's good. You know, I have very old shirts, some of them 20, some of them 30 years
Really?
old. I
Oh,
don't throw away as long as they all I wear them. My wife today says, I'm tired of your old
it
shirt
doesn't
stuff.
look old at all.
And they are mostly black and orange. I have about 10 orange, about 15, 20 black, and few other colors, but they're all. And today she got me some different ones. This is black, but there is something like this. When I look at myself, I look like Archbishop of some place. You know, they have something like this.
Yes,
I'm
yes, yes.
to people, I'm not a clergyman of any religion. Don't think because of this I am. This is my disclaimer. Yes, it is your turn.
Oh, well, no. I mean, there are, Diaco said that it is grotesque and unacceptable for any theologian who respects himself and his religion to believe that Islam, its revelation and prophetic tradition, would have maintained until the present a large part of the non-Arab Ummah in a permanent state of slavery. Such an affirmation is false and unjustified. The Quran never stops reminding people of their natural equality and liberty from the moment of their birth. She asserts that having intimate relations with a woman outside of any bonds of marriage, be it tasarri, concubinage, or whatever other name you wish to give it, is nothing less than a specialized form of fornication. So, and as the Quran says, and come not near unto fornication and adultery, lo, it is an abomination and an evil. So Muhammad Diaco doing some fantastic work fighting slavery. Yes, and it is a reality. It continues to this day. 500,000 to 1 million slaves are found in Mauritania. These are traditional old school slaves. They are hereditary black slaves, and they're all Muslims, and they've been Muslims for over 1,000 years. They're owned by Arabs, they're owned by Berbers. They emancipated them in 1970. The slave owners wouldn't let them go. In the 80s, they did it again, and they're still trying and fighting in Mauritania in order to abolish slavery and emancipate the slaves. And then, of course, we have the reality of sexual slavery, which is alive and well in many so-called Muslim countries. In the United Arab Emirates, there are about 30,000 women and even boys who are enslaved in prostitution rings. So it is, again, um, this is not an issue of the past. It is very relevant. It is pervasive in many parts of the world, in the Western world as well, but also in the Arab world and India and parts of Africa. So the struggle continues. And so
That's great.
you do an enormous amount of harm to go around saying that, you know, slavery is permissible in the Quran. Slavery is Islamic. Slavery is Quran. Slavery is prophetic. And that's what they tell the slaves in Mauritania. You know, the French had le code noir, right? And the British had like these different black codes, and the Spanish too, which were like legal manuals dealing with slavery. The Arabs had the same thing, and they're just as atrocious. And they're still selling these things in Mauritania. People are buying them, people are teaching them. They're telling their slaves who are Muslims that if you want to go to heaven, you must obey, right? And if you don't obey your master, you're going to go to hell. And they indoctrinate them, they brainwash them. And some of these enslaved
Let
black
me tell
Muslims
you,
in
there are some
Mauritania, uh, you know, uh, they're even bigger defenders of slavery than their slave masters are. This is,
many Ukrainian and Romanian, initially Romanian, Ukrainian, Russian women goes to Turkey. These so-called religious Sunni clergymen,
yeah,
they go have basically adultery because they are married, have the
of course.
adultery with them
Yep,
secretly, and some of them were exposed. Their argument is, well, these are like slaves, sex slaves. Can you
yep.
imagine to justify their own unbelievable uh, it's just incredible. Hey, I want to, there is my forward here, and there is disclaimer, trigger warning. Let me, and also sponsor some beautiful words by about your book by Bramda Abeid, Dr. Choki Al Hamil, and Dr. Khalid Abu Al Fadl. He's well known, Sultan Shaheen, Emin Rafat, and very good words about your book. And I want to finish this with trigger warning. It should be the beginning, but it is the end. Says reading this work may cause psychological, physical, and spiritual trauma. If you are a Muslim who is troubled by slavery and concubinage, how do you say it?
Concubinage. Yeah.
Concubinage, it may save your faith and your mind, timely, powerful, and provocative. It is a work of righteous rage and indignation and an Islamic emancipation proclamation. Mashallah. May God reward you, my brother. This is a beautiful book, and I hope that the publisher house publishes it as a paperback. This is very expensive.
Yes, I
Uh,
know.
Not very expensive. Let's say expensive. Some people still can afford it in the United States and Canada. But yeah, hopefully, will they publish it as a?
I hope so. And I've
Don't
checked in.
hope so. You need to push for that.
Of course, I am advocating for it. It all depends on sales. Usually, maybe for the first year or two, well, at least with my other publishers, they want to sell the hard copies. Their goal is to get the
I
books
know.
to
I know.
university libraries. And then after that, when they've sold, I don't know, 300, 500 copies or whatever in major libraries, then they might issue a paperback for the broader public, for lay people, educated readers. I hope they'll do so. You mentioned
Let me know where when the paperback comes. Let me know specifically. We introduce that one too.
You mentioned Dr. Shuki El-Hamel, okay, and he is the author of this book here.
Oh, black. Hold on. Let me show you. Can you talk meanwhile so that you will be seen alone here?
Sure.
Go
It's
ahead.
Black Morocco, a history of slavery, race, and Islam. Now, he's a
Show
historian.
it.
Yeah, he's a historian, a Moroccan historian who specializes in the history of slavery in Morocco. Very academic. Uh, I write from an academic point of view, but I also write from a religious point of view. He's not writing from a religious point of view. This is just, a very academic. Uh,
Observational.
yes. And now this book um, was translated into Arabic. It was, as far as I know, was supposed to be published in Morocco, but it was not politically correct. And so they said, Dr. Alhamel, you must be exaggerating. There's no way it could have been that bad. No, no, it was even worse. Are you offended by the sight of a naked enslaved woman on the cover of my book? Maybe I should have put depictions of black men being emasculated.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
No, and again, so we have like black Muslims who are saying, oh, Christianity is, Islam is the religion of the black man and Christianity is the religion of the slave master and so on. Well, I'm sorry to break the news to you. Okay. That you may have had it bad in the Americas. It was an abomination, right? Oh, yeah, but they didn't have plantation slavery in the Arab world. Well, yes, they did in southern Iraq, and it was so horrific. They had them chained to pegs in the swamps, and they would work them to death. It was horrific. There were several slave revolts in southern Iraq, in the marshlands, and the early years of Islam, of so-called Islam. Uh,
Wasn't Fatimi the former slaves? They rebelled against the Sultan. They established Fatimids.
well, the Mamluks
Mamluks.
were white slaves
Yeah.
who revolted, and there
Yeah.
were other
Mamluk.
instances of enslaved people like the Buyids and so on in
Yeah.
Iraq
Mamluk means enslaved.
and
Yeah.
took power. But so there was plantation slavery in Islam in so-called Islamic civilization. But the as bad as black people may have had it in the Americas, they were able to keep their equipment. Okay, so this is a euphemism for they were able to keep their penises and their testicles and their
Oh,
scrotum. Okay,
honestly, I didn't understand that way. I thought really their equipment means
no, no, no. Hey,
their knives and
I'm just gonna tell it like
yeah,
it is. If
I
you
can't
were
believe it.
a white
Okay.
slave,
Okay.
you were a white slave. Meaning, again, white is a term that is fluid and that changes over time in anything. But anyway, so by white we mean Turkish, European, Berbers. Those people, they lost their testicles. So the male slaves were castrated, okay,
Wow.
when they were little boys. So they could not reproduce. But believe it or not, and I was surprised to learn this, the other part still works, but you're sterile. So if you're castrated, you've lost your testicles, you're still able to have sex, but you're just not going to impregnate anyone. Okay,
Yeah.
this is interesting.
It
The
is an
black people, the enslaved black human beings, the procedure was called even with the abdomen. So with one swift, slice of the knife, they would remove both the penis and the scrotum in the testicles.
my God, what
And
are you telling?
these people, until very recently, and I still think they have some, they were the guardians of the Kaaba, the eunuchs. Okay, no penises, no testicles. This is what these. I'm sorry, they were Arabs. Okay, by and large. The Persians did the same thing, and so on. But okay, this is what was done to. Yeah, there was one sheikh. African American sheikh. He says, what's all of this nonsense and this propaganda about Islamic slavery? You don't see people talking about Christian slavery. And if there were so many slaves in the Muslim world, tell me why there aren't any black people. Where are all the black people? He says, I go in the States, black people. You go to Latin America, Brazil, black people. The Caribbean is filled with black people. Why are there no black people or very few
Why?
black people in the Muslim world? Well, my friend, I am sorry to tell you they couldn't have children. They were
So,
very fond of black women, and they did have children with their black slaves, but black men were unable to reproduce and pass down their genes. And so if you find anyone who's an Afro-Arab, it is not through their paternal DNA, it is always through their maternal
wow,
DNA.
wow,
And
unbelievable.
this has been studied. And then,
Unbelievable.
the African ancestry was basically bred out of people, right? It
Yeah.
became so diluted in many parts that it's not even noticeable. So
Yep.
it was horrific. And this is not anti-Islamic. It's not anti-Arab. It's not anti-anything. It's pro-human. Okay. We're not going to sweep this under the rug. We're going to say that as Muslims, as Muslimin and Mu'mineen, as insan, as human beings, we think this is deplorable. And yes, they are. People need to be contrite. They need to do tawbah. They need to repent. They need to be apologetic, and they need to compensate. Which brings
Well,
us to the
I
issue of
think people need, I may not be able to compensate to my ancestor whom I have no idea about them. I don't know them. I didn't even get any inheritance personally from anything. But therefore, I should not share their burden. But if I am bragging about them, I'm saying they are good gods, then morally, I think I should pay for their crime because I am proud of what they have done, correct?
yeah.
Therefore, I think that it is not possible. Also, practically, it is impossible that if we all go to pay for our ancestors' crimes. All of our ancestors, most of them, they were criminals. Majority of people, I do believe, in the world, they are not really peacemakers. Majority of people in the world, unfortunately, either racist or religious bigots or hedonists. And peacemakers are minority in every country. However, in the world, perhaps we are the majority because this way, uh, racist and religious bigots in a local, in a country, they may be majority, but in the world, universally, they contradict with others. They are always hostile to other races, other religious groups. They reject, exclude each other. The only one peacemakers in the world who consider every children of Adam as brothers and sisters transcends the ethnic, religious, national borders, and they are could be minority in every country, but we are really the biggest majority, but silent majority. We haven't yet transcend the borders yet, but first time in the time of internet, I think we'll be able to reach each other. There are beautiful peacemakers in Iran, in Israel, in Turkey, in Russia, in United States, in India, in every country. But unfortunately, we are basically by warmongers, nationalists, we are separated from each other. But we will reach each other, God willing, through this new technology. And
oh
finally,
yeah,
yeah,
go yeah. No, no, I agree
I,
with you.
yeah, I would like later to talk about this issue to bring peacemakers together, God willing. And also, I don't want to forget about John Brown. Was it Brown, John Brown? We
Yeah,
talk
Jonathan Brown.
about him here. I don't want to be considered as kind of one-sided. I always invite any person I criticize. I want to face-to-face discuss the issue. This is my preference, not behind the person.
Sure.
Therefore, I think you too. This is an invitation also to Brother John Brown. I want to feel, I want to expect that he has common sense, he has heart and brain. I do believe that if we discuss this issue without hostility, we just face to face, I do believe we can convince him because I cannot really understand for the life of me that a smart person as him. I have seen some of his tweets. He's very articulate, very smart, a
Sure.
sense of humor, a sense of humor too. And he's a
Yes.
smart guy and also very highly learned person, studied. And therefore, I don't understand how in the world he can think that Islam allows slavery. Therefore, I think there is something he's missing. I assume that he has good intention, but I somehow I reached the conclusion a smart person, an educated person like him, how could err so much in this area? I thought that the only way that he has bad intention, he wants to portray Islam this way. This was my initial reading, but I want to even doubt about my initial reaction to his position, his position on this issue. I want to apologize him for reading his intention. I wish that he comes, and we would like to discuss with him, God willing, face to face.
Sure. And I mean, that is the Islam that is taught. I mean, that is what you will learn at, in certain universities from many scholars. And perhaps he feels he's being faithful to the tradition, but there are many different currents in the ocean of Islam. There are many different interpretations. There are many different voices.
Maybe
And
he wanted to please some people in his environment, certain Sunni and Shia people. Maybe he may not be consciously, maybe subconsciously, he wanted to please them, not to kind of antagonize them on this issue. It seems incredible. Yeah, I don't know.
well, Allahu alam, and everyone can change their perspective and their point of view. I have, well, he has as well, repeatedly throughout his life. Otherwise, he would still be a Christian. But I have grown. I have changed my points of
MashaAllah.
view. I have evolved, and I deeply, deeply, deeply regret. I'm ashamed of some of the views that I held 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
The
Uh,
same with me when I was young at age
I
until
am
age 29.
embarrassed at some of the things that I said, and I feel
To
compelled to undo the harm that I did. Uh,
yourself and to others.
yes, that brings us back to this issue. Well, it brings us to this issue of hijab. That's the other book that we should discuss one of these
Next
days.
time, inshallah, we'll discuss hijab.
Word,
This book.
word of God or word of man. Um, After I had embraced Islam and I had studied with ulama and so on, I was very active in the community. I was writing, I was publishing. Um, yes. And basically, I was echoing what I was being taught. I was very faithful, loyal, and respectful of the ulama. Absolutely. And then I parroted their views and their positions on many topics, including the issue of the hijab.
Yep.
And some of that literature that I produced, you know, there was one called The Hijab in the Quran and the Sunnah, which included the verses of the Quran that allegedly dealt with the hijab. At that point, it's sad to say, I did not speak Arabic. I could not read Arabic. And I realized, well, when I studied Arabic, I realized that the translations were grotesque. They were completely corrupted. I mean, these translations, they did not represent all, at
Exactly.
all
I brought
what
this
the
one,
Arabic said.
Quran Reformist Translation. It is available at Amazon, also available at PDF at my academia page. This is Quran Reformist Translation. In the beginning, I give examples of some mistranslations and various verses. I provide samples from Yusuf Ali, Pickdal, Shakir, and things. I have titles, issues, and I discuss them. And in each verse, if I um, deviate from the orthodoxy, I discuss the reasons why, because of the words in the Quran, usage of the words, because of the other verses of the Quran, or whatever reason I provide, I argue, I make a case for every important deviation from Sunni or Shiite
Beautiful.
interpretation.
Beautiful.
I'm tired a little bit. Today, whole
Yes,
day
I
was
understand. Thank you for
busy.
your
We
time.
can't, we,
Much
we drove all the way
appreciated.
from Columbus to here. We were there for a conference, and then we had a peace panel here. I was 2 hours there, and then here it is. It is nice meeting you, gentlemen. Hopefully, next time we'll talk about your book on hijab, and then later on many issues we don't need to have such a long things, maybe 30, 40 minutes, less
Sure.
than an hour
Yeah.
meetings. Take care.
Inshallah. Barakallahu feek. Jazakallah khairan.
Inshallah. Take care, my brother.